This episode of The Clear Out was recorded on the 27th of July 2022 at home in Wicklow. And it is largely a discussion about the idea of imprints and how we are all entities that have been imprinted by our experiences of particularly of childhood experiences. So it's a little bit related to some of the ideas I talked about on last week's episode about what can impact us or affect us. But this week I'm thinking about what started us off, what shaped and moulded us right from the beginning, and for better or worse, how that is the defining sort of moulding ingredient in our makeup. And it's because of that these other things can impact or affect us or derail us. So that's really where I stay for most of this episode, looking at that makeup and looking at how that can dictate what we respond to, how we behave, how we perceive ourselves, and then look at maybe how we can adapt to that or become more comfortable with that. I also look at the place of rituals. I look at how modernity can or has erased our respect for rituals, particularly relating to rites of passage. That idea came out of watching the Pixar movie Turning Red, which related back to the idea of imprint and what's been imprinted on one generation and how that can be passed on to the next generation. So WALL-E, another Pixar movie, also features towards the end, again in the area of imprint, but more in a positive way. So that's it really. It's like I said, it's imprint. It's talking about the clay from which we came, the clay that we are, and how we're moulded, and how I believe our sense of well-being, our sense of comfort with ourselves depends on how successfully we negotiate that imprint, whether it's something that needs to be overcome or accommodated. It's in there. It's in the mix, and I don't think it ever goes away. And that's why sometimes we can wake up after a very long time in life and think, am I still exactly who I was 35, 40 years ago? There's a good chance you are. So you better get comfortable with it. Okay, and I hope you get comfortable with this episode. I'll see you around the corner real soon. Cheers.
Not gonna change my mind, leaving the dream behind.
Hi, my name is Dara Clear, and you are listening to The Clear Out. Welcome. How are you today? How's it going? If you're like me, your brain is like a mouldy tomato. Squashy, not particularly resistant, and just not fit for purpose. It's been busy. It's been a busy month. There's been lots and lots of activity, lots of lovely visitors to #blessed. And in fact, I'm probably going to interview one of our visitors, and that might be a little segment I may feature on a future episode. I have my good friend Sean Whitehill visiting. Sean Whitehill of travelmandalas.com. Do check those out if you have any interest in lovely, lovely art and travel and exotic locations. Sean channels his experiences and what strikes him visually, and he puts all of that into these beautiful hand-drawn mandalas, which are very unique, very special, and really, singular in what he's doing with them. And you can purchase them. You can have one all for yourself. You might even be able to commission one through his website, travelmandalas.com. I've spoken about that before. Anyway, Sean is on his travels again, and his first stop on this particular voyage of discovery, his first stop was #blessed. So he's here with us for a while, and I might take an opportunity to just have a bit of a chat with him about his love of travel, his passion for traveling and getting abroad and seeing other places and walking and allying that with art. So watch this space. And speaking of guests, I've had some lovely feedback from quite a few of you for the Aisling Cregan episodes, the Pebble Girl part 1 and 2 that were out a couple of weeks ago. So thank you for taking the time to reach out and share your responses. They have been really, really strong, positive responses to that interview, to Aisling's story, to getting a sense of Aisling and just the really positive place she's reached in her life and what she's achieved and what she's managed to overcome. And hopefully it may have even motivated some of you to try and get your hands on her fantastic book, her memoir, which is called I Am Someone by Aisling Cregan. That's published by Gill Books, and you can get that in all good bookshops, in all good libraries, and online, of course. So there you go. So thanks for that. Yes. Now, where are we at today? If you're a first-time listener, the Clear Out podcast is dedicated to explorations of wellness, explorations of staying on top of things, explorations of staying engaged with pathways to wellness, pathways to being well, pathways to managing oneself. Because when I talk about wellness, I'm not necessarily talking about happiness or being in a blissed out, serene state all of the time. I'm more talking about being engaged with oneself, being aware, being in conversation with oneself, and then using that information, using those findings to negotiate whatever the hell is going on for you at that particular moment. Because that particular moment is your life, and that particular moment is all of your life. It never goes away. That moment of being there with yourself, it's always there, and it always will be. And there it is again. So the challenge is to try and find a way to live with yourself, and to live well, and to permit yourself to thrive if that is available at that given time. That's pretty much it. And the Clear Out, of course, is dedicated to the idea of not being too po-faced, not being too precious, not being too sanctimonious, but maybe a little bit of those things, or end up in the mix. That's why it's wellness with attitude. It's wellness, but it's keeping it real. It's just trying to be in a real place. It's not performed wellness. It's not curated wellness, because I think that is a disease, a sickness, an addiction of the digital age, the desire, the compulsion to curate and present this distillation of one's life, and it's all sunsets and roses. It's all beautiful light and beaming faces. Because I suppose, why would you? Why would you put up anything else? What, you're going to put up a picture of yourself crying, looking miserable? People do that as well, and it makes everyone uncomfortable. So yet again, we have a conspiracy. Let's all do the same thing. Let's all just show nice things. Let's show this lovely meal. Let's show this lovely pint. Let's show this lovely person. Let's show this lovely place. But that can get a bit one note, a little bit one dimensional, a little bit superficial. It's just the surface, and I don't know. It's a false read. So what do you do? I mean, what do you do if that's where you consume life? If that's what you understand of somebody else, what they present in high definition on Facebook or Instagram or any other of these chosen platforms? What do you do if that's all you've got? How do you adapt? How do you learn how to engage in the flesh? How do you engage in reality? Because surely that's where real life is lived. Do you agree? I'm not laying it down as dogma, but I believe that's where the rewards are. That's where the memories are. That's where the experiences are, and that's where the real the barometer of reality gets truly tuned in an authentic way. You get a sense of, okay, this is good, this is not so good. I'm good, I'm not so good. And then you have choices. Why am I not so good? What's going on? Why? Oh, I've got a visitor. Could you hear that? Could you hear that little insect buzzing across the mic? Anyway, there you go. So yeah, that's it. That's what, again, if this is a new listen for you, that's kind of what goes on the clear out, and it's most episodes so far, it's just me, one man on his mic, holding forth on whatever is of interest to me in any given week. And otherwise, there are a couple of interviews, and as I said in last week's episode, there will be more interviews coming. That you'll see them as they arise. Now, this week, what's going on? Mouldy tomato head is what I've got. Mouldy tomato brain. Bit mushy. Struggling to keep a clear thought in my head. Lots of distractions. Lots of good, positive distractions. But even good, positive distractions can be a bit too much at times. And you might just crave that stillness. You might just crave that silence, that moment to gather yourself, to compose yourself, to bring yourself back to center, rather than being pulled this way and that. So funnily enough, this morning, for no good reason really, none whatsoever, just been a bit tired and a bit cranky. And I've covered this terrain before. I was a bit too snappy, a bit too snippety snip with my daughter, my poor old daughter. She cops it, and I had to grovel. I had to prostrate myself at her feet and beg for forgiveness. I'm sorry. I'm being totally unreasonable and taking it out on you. And she had no amends to make. I made amends. And then I had a Tai Chi class to teach. And that was lovely. And I brought myself back into a sort of a happier place and got my energy into a more balanced place, and it was all very calming and centering and stabilizing. And then myself and my daughter and Travel Mandalas, Sean, we went off and had a swim in the sea and a coffee and cake for the grown-ups and a hot chocolate and cake for my daughter. And it was a very successful little excursion. And here I am, just as I was last week, trying to exploit the only window I've managed to carve out for myself to record the podcast until next time. And that's what I'm doing right now, and I'm trying not to think about the ticking clock. That might make me lose my train and speed up unnecessarily. That's something I was talking about in the Tai Chi class earlier. One of my students, we were actually mostly focusing on a series of Qi breathing exercises, more typically known as Qi Gong practice. And my student was punching the air, but just a little bit too quick, a little bit too out of control, I would say, for what we were trying to focus on. And I just reminded everyone, let's ask ourselves, are we driving the car, or is the car driving us? We need to be in control. We need to be sitting comfortably in that seat, and we need to decide how fast we want to go. We've got the gear stick, we've got the brakes, we've got the steering wheel. What are we going to do? Don't get rushed. Don't get forced to be on the road in a way you don't want to be. And yeah, it worked. She pulled it back and got into a better zone, and the punching, the flow returned to what she was doing. And I have to say, personally, that's something that I respond to in terms of how I understand stressors, the things that trigger, the things that derail. I mean, I spoke a little bit about this last week, in last week's episode, but I think for me, it might not be individual things that I respond to, but more circumstances or environments or atmospheres that I find more triggering, to use that beloved word. And that idea of I'm being forced to be on the road in a way I don't want to be there. I'm being forced to drive in a way I don't want to. And that is very much a major stress area for me. And I suppose you draw a line. I'm look at that immediately. I instinctively try to take it away from myself and take it into the generic you, because that's safer. That's a safer place. It's a safer place to talk about one's issues if I make it a generic you. But really, I should talk about me. I should talk about I, and then it becomes experience. It becomes knowledge. It becomes the personal. And then you, as the listener, can go, okay, yeah, maybe I relate to that. Rather than me making the assumption that this is something that we all do. Now, that said, that is an assumption I make. My assumption is we're all doing it. We're all struggling. We're all negotiating ourselves all the time. We're all trying to keep ourselves away from the things that upset us, away from the things that knock us out of our stride and send us spinning into the ditch of what? The ditch of crisis, the ditch of self-doubt, the ditch of self-recrimination. I mean, ditches. What do we think? Is a ditch a nice place to be? I remember when I was younger, I will return to the point I was trying to make, but I remember when I was younger, there were some men in the local area, And I grew up not far from #blessed in the beautiful Wicklow countryside. And there were some men who were, how shall I put it, accomplished drinkers of alcoholic beverages. And those men would sometimes make the walk, not a long walk, we're talking maybe a mile or two, a couple of kilometres. They try and make the walk from the local pub back up the long steep hill to where they lived, and perhaps, or maybe certainly in an altered state, in a state of some alcoholic debilitation. And very wisely, a bit like don't drink and drive, their philosophy must have been don't drink and walk, because they'd simply collapse in the ditch. And you'd be driving along, so maybe I'd see it from the car window as a child passenger. You just see the two legs sticking out onto the road while they slept blissfully in the ditch. And even as I bring up that memory, I really do have a strong feeling of not, oh my goodness, there's a drunken man sleeping in the ditch. I'm not really focusing on the alcoholic self-annihilation. I'm thinking that's probably incredibly comfortable. Nature has provided a lovely bed for that drunken man. So ditches, not necessarily bad places to end up. And certainly you'd rather fall into a ditch than fall onto a road or fall over a bridge. Yes. So, what was the point I was trying to make before? I went from I to you. Now, let me return to I. I was going to say about this idea of particular environments or particular atmospheres or circumstances, the circumstances of location that would trigger me now as a grown-up and make me feel, I don't want to be here. I'm not comfortable being here. I'm looking for the escape hatch. I'm looking for the way out. I don't want to be forced into being in this part of the road, so to speak. I don't want to be forced to drive this way, so to speak. And I think it goes back to childhood, because my parents at that time, we're talking the 70s and 80s, their prime area of social engagement and social enjoyment, and this was by no means untypical for an Irish family of those years and my parents' inclinations. The place to be was the local pub, and that's where the socialising happened. And over time, I just thought, I don't want to be in the pub. I don't want to be in this place. I don't want to be stuck here, because there's no sense of when it might end. There's no sense of this is only a short thing and then you're back home. Because at home, there's more control and it's a safer place to be. That's how I felt about it. And I think it started there. And that's as much as I'll reveal for now. Although I may have mentioned this before. I do remember being in what was my parents' local pub of choice way back then, and I certainly must have been only around 7 or 8, 9 at most, I would argue, because I remember being in the pub, and I think it was a Sunday evening, and the weekends it would have been very busy at that time. Pubs aren't really what they were. They've changed since the smoking ban was introduced several years ago, and they've changed. Pubs now mostly it's a place to get food as much as drink, and there's music, and it's not just the old saloon where you go to drink away your worries. But back in the time I'm talking about, it was very much this is the drinking hub. And I remember being in that pub, and The Muppet Show came on the television. And forgive me if you've heard this one before on the podcast. I can't remember if I've shared this or not. But I remember going, seeing the Muppet Show come on the TV, and the TV sat high above the bar on the back wall alongside the bottles of spirits and whatnot. And I was like, oh, fantastic, the Muppet Show. And even though I couldn't really hear it, I was only too delighted to scooch myself up to the bar. And I don't know if I managed to get up on a stool or just sort of rest my hands on the bar and just look up at the TV. But there I was, ensconced, looking at the likes of Kermit the Frog and Fozzie Bear and Gonzo and Animal and Miss Piggy, Scooter, you name it, the Muppet Show crew. And a fight between angry men broke out above my head. But I just kept on watching. Tunnel vision. I won't worry about this glass shattering around me, and no one else seems to be worried either. So I'll just, I'll just keep watching. So anyway, there you go. Good times. The old days, the golden days, the halcyon days. Now, speaking of all of that, just to draw a connection, what I wanted to kind of talk about today, and not kind of, I just want to talk about it. I was thinking about this idea, and this does connect a bit. It does connect to what I was talking about last week. Last week I was talking about things that impact us, things that penetrate our sense of calm, penetrate our sense of well-being, things that get into us and disturb us and unsettle us. And this is, it's related. Of course it's related, because, and maybe this is the natural extension of that discussion. Because the thing is, whatever is deeply internal in our molding, whatever is deeply internal in how we were formed and how our personalities were formed and how our sense of self was formed, that is going to dictate what we respond to externally. That's what's going to dictate what triggers us, upsets us, destabilizes us. That's going to dictate what gets in and pushes a button in us. And the way I was talking about this to a friend the other night, I was talking in terms of imprint. What's imprinted on us? And I suppose it's a pretty straightforward idea, isn't it? We are talking about childhood. We are talking about the dominant moulding figures in our lives, which is typically parents or other significant adults, minders, guardians, whoever it might be, for better or for worse, because imprints can be negative or positive. But my conviction is whatever was imprinted on us at a very young age, when, for want of a better metaphor, where we're malleable, like plasticine, like Play-Doh, like moulding clay. We're malleable, and we can be shaped and moulded, and we can be squeezed, we can be dented, we can be cut, we can be forced into shapes, and literally the prints of others can be left on us. And so I was sort of thinking in those terms, that whatever that formative imprint was or is, I believe that's what we're left to come to terms with as we grow, as we age, as we mature. And I believe our level of happiness, our level of comfort with ourselves is almost entirely linked to how successful we are in coming to terms with the marks that have been made on us. And of course, if you take that idea to its natural place, when I use a phrase like that, the marks that have been made on us, one road to go down, of course, is to think of the worst possible situations, maybe situations like Aisling Cregan described so eloquently in her book, and how she spoke about so eloquently and with such composure in her interview with me a few weeks ago. We might think about those kinds of things, stories of abuse, stories of violence, stories of psychological torment, of sexual abuse. That's a profoundly disturbing area and a profoundly damaging thing to experience as a child, because, of course, maybe there's no one more sensitive to life than a child. There's no one who is going to be more impacted by the circumstances of life than a child. And what we learn as we get older, and what we're encouraged to learn, is how to be tougher, how to be more resilient, how to mind ourselves and build ourselves. And in a way, that's the Western model, isn't it? The building project. The building project of self, to build yourself into a capable, productive citizen, to build yourself into a capable, productive member of society. And depending on what part of the world you're in, fundamentally, it's still a very linear building project that takes us along the conventional capitalist route of education, further education, career, money, accumulation of capital, consolidation of that capital, career advancement, social consolidation via marriage, via family making, and you become a building block in a cohesive society built along shared values. And of course, you look at that model the way I've just laid it out, and there's nothing to be frightened of. There's nothing to be alarmed by. There's nothing to judge unduly. However, if your starting point is a starting point of being damaged, a lot of that stuff just doesn't fall into place in an easy way. A lot of that stuff doesn't necessarily make sense, because the ultimate building block of society is the family unit. And so if you're coming out of that as someone who has a negative or an adverse imprint, where do you go from there? Where do you go? How do you implement yourself or input yourself into society? How do you find where you fit? What's your place? Because you haven't really been given a clean start. You haven't been given a fair start. You haven't been given a sense of calmness and a sense of stability. And those two things, calmness and stability, they're often one of the best starting points from which to embark on journeys. They're one of the best starting points to deal with difficult situations. They're one of the best starting points to respond in optimal ways and to feel a sense of your own capability and to feel open to new possibilities. And so the idea then of the imprint, I think is definitive. I think it defines all of us. What we came up with, what molded our convictions about ourselves, and what molded our convictions about life, and molded our convictions about the safety or otherwise of the world. And when I was talking about this with a friend the other night, I mean, I was just, we're just talking about different approaches to living, different value systems, different ways of thinking, different ways of understanding, and the sort of the clash, or the alienation, or the failure to comprehend between adults who simply have different value systems, or who are viewing the world differently to one another. And my friend was kind of suggesting that the people who don't get the way he and I maybe view things were a mystery to him. And there was a certain, I think his first reaction, his first sort of impulse was to be sort of quite judgmental. And I mean, I get it, and I'm quick to judge myself. But that's when I was arguing, well, what's their imprint? What did they start off with? Because whatever they were given has prompted the choosing of the path that they found themselves on. And it's not right or wrong, but you can find yourself going, this is just not what I would have chosen for myself, and that can be a point of friction and a point of discomfort. But of course, someone can get to that point, that different point to you, and be extremely happy and feel enormously well in themselves and in their decision making. But it's not always the case. It's not always the case, of course. And people can look at me and my choices and make their own analysis and go, well, not sure about that choice to do the podcast, not sure about that choice to do those other things, not sure who that guy thinks he is, sitting at his mic once a week trying to work it all out. I think he has issues. I think he should be applying himself to other things, and pursue things that are more financially dependable. Perhaps that's one way to view what I'm doing. But I don't know. I'm working with my imprint, and I'm in a place now in my life, in my late 40s, where a lot of the time I feel that's immediately a qualifying fence-sitting verb to use there. I sense, it's my feeling that I feel that a lot of the time I enjoy enormously satisfying clarity about the choices I'm making, although they do come at a cost. They're they're not filling my boots with gold doubloons, but then I'm not a pirate, or am I, marauding the seas of the internet? I'm not filling my boots with gold doubloons, but there's clarity in what I'm doing for me, and there's for what I enjoy, for what motivates me, that clarity is enormously satisfying. I find it personally reassuring, and it does away with uncertainty and anxiety about other choices I could be making. As much as I can step out of this and go, okay, well, what's the future? Where does this lead? What's it gonna deliver in a practical sense, and certainly is it going to fit into some sort of economically rewarding structure. I don't know, but that's not the prime motivator here. And see, we come back to imprint. So the prime motivator for me is not money or financial return, as much as I would like that and would definitely benefit from that. The prime motivator is to be more aligned with myself and doing things that are aligned with what I care about, with what I feel passionate about, with what I feel I have an aptitude for, and to commit to those things without fear and without hesitation, and then let the chips fall where they may. That's pretty much it. But again, the broader sense of the imprint, everyone is negotiating their own imprint. Some people are hiding from it. Some people are leaning into it. Some people are sitting in counselling weekly, daily, to try and understand it, to try and change the imprint, to try and unlearn the imprint, to recondition the imprint. And it's, as I said earlier, it's I think it's a very defining aspect of, if not the defining aspect of our internal landscape, for better or worse. And I've been but I feel I've identified this in a couple of movies I've been watching. Yet again, the movies come into a lot of what we discuss here and talk about on the Clear Out. And I was watching with my daughter. Now this is funny because last week, of course, I was talking about how my daughter and I watched Some Like It Hot, and how my wife was like, I'm not sure if our 8-year-old, nearly 9-year-old daughter should be exposed to Marilyn Monroe and that representation of femininity, of female sexuality, of female beauty at this stage. Now, that wasn't a discussion my wife and I had. My wife passed the screen, made a comment about poor Marilyn Monroe, and was just kind of going, really, is this, should our daughter really be looking at this now? And my general rule of thumb is, if my daughter's with me, we don't just watch anything. I think about what we watch. If it's not obviously a children's movie, I will stop, think, revisit the movie in my mind if I need to, and then go, no, I think this is okay, and then I'll be with her, and then if anything comes up, we can talk about it. So that came up last week and kind of triggered a bit of a conversation around what representations of femininity and what representations of womanhood my daughter was being exposed to, and Beyonce came into that discussion as well. But this week, and I had no anxiety. I had zero anxiety about my daughter watching Some Like It Hot with me, about seeing Marilyn Monroe, who is certainly being presented in quite a sexualized way in that movie. But the tone of the movie is fun, it's gentle, it's woman positive, it's very well performed, and there's a lot of physical comedy in it. And I felt my daughter was sophisticated enough to take it on quite a few levels, and she did, and we enjoyed it. But funnily enough, earlier this year or late last year, Pixar came out with the movie Turning Red. Now, if you haven't heard about Turning Red, fundamentally, it's the story about a 13-year-old girl in Toronto, Canada, who is of Chinese background, so second generation Chinese, living in Toronto in Canada. It's set in set in the early 2000s, and she gets her period, and it's an extremely confronting episode in her life, and she is struggling enormously with the hormonal chaos that comes with having a period, or comes with the onset of that stage of her development. And in her family, in the movie, in her family, the women in that family line, when they get their periods, when they start to menstruate, they turn into giant red pandas. And so that's how it's represented in the movie. She wakes up one morning after a very disturbed night's sleep, after a very embarrassing incident with her mother, who found drawings she had done of a boy she fancied, and she dragged her daughter to the local store where the boy worked and showed him the drawings, and gave out to him, made a holy show of her daughter, and then the daughter had this horrendous, tormented night's sleep, and then woke up the next morning as a giant red panda. And the rest of the movie basically shows how she tries to negotiate that stage of her life, and how the mother is trying to control everything and keep her close and make sure she remains a very devoted, well-behaved daughter, and the daughter's resisting, bucking against that control. And then there's a grandmother who comes in, and the mother is scared of the grandmother, and it's funny and it's kind of intense. And I read about the movie and I understood what it was about before I watched it, and it was basically very highly acclaimed for looking at that subject and bringing it to the screen so successfully. It was also considered a very successful depiction of the Asian Canadian experience, and maybe specifically the Chinese experience there. So that kind of second generation or immigrant experience was captured with great accuracy. So great, all good stuff. But I was wary of showing that movie to my daughter, and because I was thinking, she's only 8. I'm not sure she needs to be confronted with the drama of this story, and confronted with the drama of getting your first period, because she's only 8. And I felt my wife and I were sort of on the same page. And a friend of ours told us with great confidence that she had shown the movie to her son, who I think was even younger, maybe 7. And I'm like, yeah, grand, that's your choice, and go for it, and no problem. And I also thought, well, there's nothing at stake. There's nothing at stake for that boy. I mean, it's great, he's getting educated, he's getting to think about girls with a level of understanding that he may benefit from in the future, and I'm sure that's where his mother was coming from as well. But I also thought, but this isn't going to impact him in terms of he doesn't need to be fearful or anxious that this is going to happen to his body in a few years' time. And so I sat down to watch the movie myself a few months ago, and I watched it to kind of screen it, to vet it before allowing my daughter to see it. And I was going through that stage of the movie where she's having the horrendous, embarrassing scene with her mother at the store, the local kind of corner shop, and then has the horror night, the night of horror dreams, and wakes up in hormonal hell as the red panda, and her mother's bursting into the bathroom to help her and presenting painkillers and an enormous box of every female hygiene product and menstrual product that you could shake a stick at, all kinds of different pads. And I was watching it by myself late at night, just feeling stressed. Now, I'm not stressing about the future experience of my daughter. I was going, I don't want to present this to my daughter now and have her living in dread for the next, 3-4 years before that stage of her life happens. And certainly I didn't want to do that without my wife also seeing the movie. But what should happen? Only a few weeks ago, when my wife was having a bit of a celebration here, my daughter stayed next door. My cousin was down, and she spent the night with my cousin in their place at #blessed. And my cousin was feeling a bit under the weather, and he took himself off to bed, but he allowed my daughter to choose what movie she wanted to watch. And my daughter has been in my ear all year. I want to see Turning Red. I want to see Turning Red. When can we see Turning Red? And I just pretended. I had been pretending. I can't get it. I just can't get it. I'm sorry. I don't know when it's available. I can't get it. But of course, the very first opportunity she was over with my cousin, and she's like, "Oh, cool, let's watch that. Oh, cool, there's Turning Red. Let's watch that." So she did. And she told me the next day, she said, "Oh yeah, watch Turning Red." And I just kind of felt this like big internal gulp. Really? And she was like, "Oh, it's hilarious. It's so funny. It's just about this girl, and she becomes a red panda." And she kind of skirted over the anatomical implications. But the more she spoke about it, the more she seemed to be totally relaxed with it. And she did then have a very brief conversation with my wife about periods, and that lasted. It was totally just in natural flow of conversation, came and went. And my daughter took a position of assumed knowledge and understanding, and there was no need to go into any details. And so she sat down to watch it again this morning, and I watched it with her, and it was all grand. And there's lots of comedy, of course. It's a Pixar movie and very lovely, and lots of funny stuff, and it is very insightful, and it's very moving. But I got thinking again about this idea of imprints, because again, in a key moment, and I'm not going to destroy the movie with lots of spoilers, but in a key moment in the story, there is another big incident, and it looks like the world's going to come crashing down on the central character. And she's at a party, and she loses her temper, and the red panda comes out and scares everybody, including the birthday boy. And her mother has to come and do the walk of shame because her child has failed, and she's been given out to by the parents of the party child, the party boy, the birthday boy. And the daughter's convinced her mother is going to murder her, and the mother doesn't. And you can just see the way it's carried. The mother is just carrying her daughter's burden and carrying the pain, and not really, just doesn't have the equipment to express the relatability, doesn't have the equipment to go, I know what this is, I know what's happening, and just doesn't say anything to the daughter. And they're just driving home in the car, and the daughter's looking across at the mother from the passenger seat, sort of, you can see the cogs are turning, just looking at her mother in a new way, she doesn't know what it is that's going on, but there's a sense of, okay, there's a depth of understanding here. There's something else going on that's very deep, that's very internal, that's connected to all of this. I don't understand it. And and then the mother just reaches over and touches her hand as she's driving, not just looking straight ahead. And I was watching it going, I just thought it was, I was very moved. Let's put it that way. Did I cry? Okay, I cried. Okay? Don't worry about it. I cry. And if I'm watching a movie, and I've definitely said this before, if I'm watching a movie in the morning and I'm a little bit tired, I am utterly defenseless. And if it's a well-told story, and Christ, it doesn't even have to be a well-told story, I'd probably cry at anything. If it's remotely sentimental or moving into that area of often, I guess it would be about family tension, bonding, overcoming something, sharing the moment. I'm gone. When there's emotional vulnerability, openness, or conflict, and yearning, emotional yearning, I there's nothing I can do. So I was just sitting there watching my daughter. You know, she has a habit of, I can just feel her presence in my peripheral vision, and I might see her head just leaning forward and slightly turning and looking up at me to go, is he crying? And I'm like, oh, just stop looking at me. You just enjoy your movie your way. I'll enjoy it my way. But the imprint, I just thought, this is it. Like, this is what I'm talking about. It's in the mix, this thing of what was imprinted on the mother, and then what has she imprinted on the daughter, and what's the role of the grandmother, who's this fierce figure in the movie and who has a very mysterious scar on her face. And of course, it's all explained later. I'm not going to ruin it for you. It's worth checking out. It's worth checking out. But it's profound, I think. I mean, again, you know, you can go, it's not profound, it's just a kids movie, relax, chill the bones, don't worry about it. But I disagree. And listen, I'm speaking as a man, for God's sake, so what the hell do I know? But it does tap into something very potent about mothers and daughters, and certainly mothers and daughters, and going through these key moments and these developmental changes, these watershed moments in a woman's life, and beginning adolescence. And it's deep stuff, and it's life-changing, really. That would be my perception from my experience of talking to my wife, to other partners I've had over the years. It's not anything except a big deal, I suppose. I mean, I don't know. I mean, look, I'm sure there's a whole range of different experiences, and of course there are many ways that can be part of a woman's life, and some women have an easier time than others. But gosh, when I think back to secondary school and how immature myself and my male friends were, and the jokes we made about our female classmates, the teasing, the slagging, and I mean, I think of myself and my friends very fondly, by the way. I don't think we were evil, misogynistic monsters by any means, but certainly we were immature. But none of what we did was mean-spirited. We weren't trying to hurt anybody. For us, it was all just good fun, and these were girls that we liked and got on well with, and even the ones that we didn't particularly like and didn't particularly get on with, and if we were teasing them, it certainly wasn't, there was nothing malicious. I guess in our immaturity, we just assumed that everybody was in on the joke. But of course, I recognise now that that's colossally naive. And joking is very fun. It's all good fun until somebody gets hurt. And then, sure, look, you just have to cope with what comes next, and deal with it, and hopefully find a nice way to respond. But yeah, turning red. So it's a thought-provoking, stirring children's movie with a lot of humor, a lot of intelligence, and some lovely cultural stuff as well, because the mother and the grandmother summons the elders the older women amongst their friendship, amongst their circle of friends, to come in and be supportive and rally round and try and observe a ritual, a coming of age ritual for the daughter. And yeah, I mean, all of that stuff. I mean, I think that stuff is always relevant, and sometimes I think in the Western mind, when we observe rituals from outside the West, and certainly rituals related to rites of passage, rituals related to coming of age, either for a boy or a girl, that entrance into adolescence, that doorway, gateway to maturation, to adulthood. It's easy to make it something foreign. It's easy to make it something exotic, to reduce it, to fetishize it, to look at it in a very how strange, how quaint, how unusual sort of way. But it's my opinion that it's been our great loss in modern Western capitalist culture to have lost our sense of ritual, and to have lost maybe a sense of reverence, or a sense of no, maybe not reverence, but maybe a willingness to keep certain legacies or certain parts of our heritage alive. I think there's something that's enormously healthy in a community when there's a ritual that the community engages in, particularly in the area of guiding young people and welcoming young people to a new stage and a new status in that community. And it's probably something that modernity has been critical of. Whatever. I'm not necessarily talking about modernity right now in 2022, but like modernity as an idea, the modernizing energy is selective. The modernizing energy, or the modernizing ideology, it's a separating mechanism, separating the old from the new, and determining what's worth keeping and determining what needs to be thrown away. So the modernizing attitude in the West has probably rejected many traditions and rejected many older ways of guiding young people to their new status, and something has been lost. That's my opinion. And certainly I would recognize in martial arts and this is not necessarily the same thing, but certainly a grading in karate is a big deal. So when a young person goes through the process of subjecting themselves to examination so they can progress to the next level in martial arts and in karate, in my experience, that's a big deal. It's a big deal, and it's quite momentous for the person in question. And in fact, it doesn't matter if you're a kid or an adult practitioner. Getting that new belt, getting that new colour, getting that acknowledgement within the community in what is a public space it's a big deal. We respond to it. We respond to it as people. I'm stepping out here and I'm presenting myself to the community. Now, okay, I'm talking about the community of one karate club, but sometimes that happens in a larger arena, and certainly by the time if you keep training and you manage to get to the stage of your training where you can present yourself for your first black belt examination, I mean, that is a rite of passage. That is a ritual that is full of tradition, that has significant expectations on what you should do, how you should perform, how you should present yourself, and what sort of spirit you should demonstrate in something of a cauldron under the examination of experienced examiners, often the chief examiners within your organization. And in karate, that's often someone who's traveled from Japan. And that is a very big deal. And it's a very big deal to go through that and emerge successfully and enjoy this new level of esteem amongst your peers and amongst others. And there's something in that experience, and there's something in that journey and in subjecting yourself to that ritual that is empowering, because in most circumstances there should be no hiding places. So you are vulnerable, and you're stepping up and being vulnerable and putting yourself into the danger zone, and it's a big deal. And I think for the people who sort of value such things, and who are engaging with that experience in that way, it's enormously rewarding. So well done. Oh, there's my little alarm. So well done to anyone out there who has managed to get yourself a black belt. And I don't mean the ones for $5.99 down in Dunn's stores. You know what I'm talking about, lads. You know, the one that says the apprenticeship is over. You're ready to pick up your tools and go forth and start pitching your tent for work. Yeah, so there you go. Rituals. What do you think? What sort of rituals still exist? Do you have a ritual? I think that's what happens nowadays. People create their own personal ones. If they're looking for something that's vaguely spiritual or has deeper resonance or deeper meaning, I think a lot of people create their own little rituals, and I think that's a lovely thing. And we all have that available to us if that's what we want. That's, for me, again, it's something that is empowering. It's something that can be your own personal process, your own personal pilgrimage, your own personal ownership of meaning making, creating meaning, imparting meaning onto something. That's something we can all do for ourselves if we feel the lack of it in our lives. And a lot of the practice that I do myself is in that area, and is my way of inviting that sort of mindfulness or thinking or sensibility into my life on a regular basis. And there's an element of it in swimming when I swim, and more obviously an element of it in my martial arts practice, and the breathing practices that go with that, and the mindfulness that goes with that, the solitude that goes with that. There's a lot of that in the mix. So yeah, because otherwise, I don't know. Ask yourself, what rites of passage do you see in the society in which you live? For many young people, when they finish school, the rite of passage seems to be to get a ticket to go to a destination somewhere where everyone can get obliterated with alcohol. And lots of other young people will be there too. And maybe there might be tattoos. Maybe there might be lots of sex. Maybe there might be fighting, but lots of drinking. That's not one I value. I'm sorry, lads. Sorry to be the Puritan in the room. That was never my scene, and at this stage, I don't feel it ever will be. So there you go. One other thing I saw, and I'm gonna be wrapping this up pretty quickly. One other thing I saw was another Pixar movie we revisited, and it was Wall-E. Wall-E from 2008, and that, if you haven't seen it, is fundamentally a love story set in a dystopian future that starts on a desolate, utterly contaminated planet Earth and takes place then in outer space, where a little rubbish collecting droid falls in love with a super slick, sleek, high-tech flying robot that is an environmental research or an environmental search and locate machine that's trying to find places where human life can thrive again. And her mission is to find a plant, evidence of nature being able to grow, viable growth in a healthy environment. And that's the sort of the driver. The driver of the plot is, can she bring a plant from Earth back to this human colony of slug-like people who've been sitting on their butts in mechanized mobile chairs and watching TV screens and consuming vast quantities of junk food for years and years and years and years up in space on a single spaceship. Can this droid, this super eco search and locate droid, bring a plant to the ship so they know it's safe to return to Earth? That drives the plot, but along the way, the little clunky, aesthetically blocky opposite of sleek creation that is Wall-E falls in love with the other droid, and it is quite simply a beautiful romance, and it's one of the most romantic moments in movies of the last 20 years, when at the end of the movie, and this one 2008, it's a spoiler, I don't care, go and watch it, hard luck, the droid, who fundamentally is based on Charlie Chaplin, and he's a romantic soul inside a garbage compacting cube. That's like he's like a gas fire that's been cut in half, but he's very much like Chaplin. He's a clown, and as I've discussed before on a very early episode of the podcast, clowns ultimately, they represent the id, they represent appetite, they represent innocence, they represent curiosity, they represent the guileless child in all of us, and they are that. I think that's what makes clowns such astonishingly powerful avatars for human yearning and human experience. And it's why, of course, when the clown is flipped into an evil character, it's so disturbing. Done, of course, so successfully by Stephen King in It. And, of course, by the Joker from the world of Batman, because he is an evil clown. But in any case, Wall-E, the Chaplinesque garbage droid, he has a love affair with it's Hello Dolly. I think it's Hello Dolly. Michael Crawford, Barbara Streisand. That's Hello Dolly, isn't it? Funny Girl, it's Hello Dolly. So he's always looking at this old this videotape, this VHS tape of Hello Dolly in his little home, and so he's got music in his heart. He's got musicals in his heart. He's a song and dance man. He's full of the romance of musicals. And again, at the very end of the movie, when he has been virtually crushed by the evil AI that runs the spaceship, who wants to stay in power over the human colony, Wally is returned to Earth, and the super slick droid, who is Eva, she restores him at hyperspeed and has him back in ship-shape condition, but his soul is gone. His soul is gone. He's not there. And see, she has fallen in love with him because she was able to access his memories and realised that when she was in a state of deep sleep, deep hibernation before returning to the space colony, he was looking after her and trying to romance her and getting electrocuted and crashing into things. And she realised, oh my goodness, this guy is so special. And she fell in love with him. And there she is at the end, and he's gone, and he saved everyone. He got the colony back to Earth, but got crushed. And she reaches out to hold his hand, which he was trying to do for the entire movie, looking for that moment of connection, that moment of intimacy. And she wasn't interested. She was just on her mission and exasperated by him and frustrated and infuriated by him and his clumsy, clunky, romantic idiocy. And she looks at him and her heart is broken, and she reaches out to hold his hand and grabs it, and he's dead, nothing going on behind the eyes. And then she just turns to go, but he holds on, and he suddenly comes back to life, and he looks down and he sees her hand clutching his, and he's the happiest droid that ever lived. And that's imprint as well. The imprint of love, the imprint of being chosen, the imprint of being seen. I'm going to imprint my foot on this kitten's butt. Ruby, just wait. Here, come here. Okay, on that purry note, I'm going to leave you to think about imprints and romance and garbage droids and all sorts of other things. Thank you so much for listening. Remember, if you like what you're hearing, if you enjoy this podcast, if you enjoy this show, if it's diverting, if it's entertaining, if it's thought-provoking, if it's any number of things that are positive, you can make a contribution to the continuing productivity of the Clear Out. You can use the supporter link, which you can find in the description of this episode, for a one-off donation. Or if you want to become a regular contributor to the show, you can do so using the Patreon link. That's patreon.com/theclearout. And I would welcome whatever you could give. And if you can't give any money, don't worry about it. You could share some love on social media. You could recommend the show to a friend. And I will continue doing what I'm doing and try to grow, try to build like a good little capitalist. Okay. Otherwise, catch me on social media. The Clear Out podcast is on Facebook. It's on YouTube. It's on Instagram. The Clear Out 2 is on Twitter. And if you ever have anything you'd like to share, any suggestions for the show, for subject matter, for guests, you can email me at theclearoutlive@gmail.com. Okay, that's it. That's all I've got. Hope you enjoyed what you heard. I will talk to you next week. Take it easy. Mind yourselves. All the best. Bye.